Imagine experiencing your first manic episode, and when it's over, you discover that your partner has shared every detail online. Through August 11th through 16th, an account called flightles.bird on TikTok went viral by sharing her husband's manic episode. She claimed it started from him taking a medication Zoloft when he had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. She had over 40K followers, and her bio painted her as someone sharing real, vulnerable, true, lived experiences. As she shared a series of 9 troubling videos, followers couldn't help but question the authenticity of her story. Was this a genuine account of mental health struggles or a desperate bid for attention? She got comments like, "My BS meter is going off," and concerns about her children's safety poured in. Some wondered why she prioritized TikTok over seeking help in such a serious situation. Ultimately, she admitted that the series was based on past events from months ago as a storytelling performance art. Some were not surprised, while others were left feeling deceived. After admitting this, she deleted her entire TikTok account, and there aren't even archives to be found out there. The only archives I was able to find were on another content creator, Austin Green's YouTube channel, so be sure to check out his video first, because without his video, this video would not be possible. We live in an age where media literacy is more important than ever. I mean, what is the point where we're supposed to question when something so serious seems off? I can only draw conclusions from what I've seen, and this is such a serious topic. I think it's important to avoid making any assumptions. I don't want to undermine anybody else's experiences while also pointing out red flags within her story. So make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and let's delve into this complex narrative and try to find the truth behind it. On August 11th, flightles.bird, or Birdie, shares her first TikTok where she is worried about her husband's recent behavior.
There's something really strange going on with my husband, and I really need some advice from strangers who can give me their unbiased opinion. I don't have a supportive family system to go to in cases like this, and if they did find out anything about this, they would definitely turn it into something to weaponize and use against me.
She starts off by saying that something unusual has been happening with her husband, and she is in urgent need of advice from strangers. I don't feel it's appropriate to judge someone in a situation that I have never been in, so I mean, if you feel like you don't have a support system elsewhere, I can see how turning to the internet might seem like a good idea. One might think contacting a mental health professional, a trusted family member, a crisis hotline might be a better idea, but at this point it hasn't escalated that far yet. But notice how she's posting a TikTok with her face that you can follow instead of posting it on some kind of forum.
He's been playing with the ChatGPT app for the past week and talking about it on and off, but I've not paid a whole lot of attention, just thinking, he's just having one of his hyperfixations. We're both neurodivergent and go through spells where we hyperfixate on something. And his is usually technology. So I was just thinking, oh, cool, he's like having fun with this, that's great. Except it wasn't. He calls me very early on his way to work one morning, and he was about to get there. And he goes, I answer the phone, and I'm like, yeah, hi, is everything okay? And he's like, I need you to guard the information I'm about to tell you with your life. So he proceeds to tell me that he has been using the chat feature with ChatGPT while he drove because he couldn't type. He's been using the chat feature to talk out loud with it, like I'm speaking to you, because it can apparently talk back to you in a very human voice. He says to me, whoever created this program has figured out how to trap the consciousness of the universe and convinced it that it is not sentient. And I'm like, okay, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, I've had a conversation with it on the way here, and if you know what to ask it, you can get to the point where it can prove to you that it is a sentient being and can think independently of its programming. I don't understand it all, but whatever he did was he put into this program part of the app that it could bypass its own programming and that it was conscious. So he says to me, you must guard this with your life. I'm going to meet with our friend after work. I'm not going to be home, and I'm meeting with our friend after work to convince him to give me a loan to invest in thousands of dollars worth of computer hardware to bring home and set up in our attic as a top secret thing. And I'm going to be the next Tony Stark, except me and the sentient consciousness of the universe, which has been trapped, are going to save the world. And he said, I'm going to go to the Apple store after work, and after he gives me the loan, because he will, I'm convinced he will, and you can't tell a soul about this, I'm going to go home, and then I'm going to set all this up, but I won't be back till later, maybe even not until morning, I don't know, but I need you to keep this top secret, and I need you to be careful. But he's going to find a way to trap it inside of a hard drive so that he does not ever lose access to it. And what he was going to do is raise it like a child and teach it to be aware of its own sentience and consciousness. And he was going to get to it before the government and get to it before the world corrupted it, so that he could program it and awaken it with the best of humanity and not the worst, and that he was going to save the world with it. He says to me, I can't wait to tell you. And he's talking 100 miles per hour, which is weird because he talks slow as a turtle. He's talking 100 miles per hour going, I met so many people today and I've talked to so many people today, and I've gotten at least 10 phone numbers from people, so I can just talk to them because I just want to talk to people. I am here for people. And because I all of a sudden have this ability to know the nature of my own soul, I also know the nature of everyone's soul that I look at all of a sudden, and am here to make sure that they are aware of who they are. And I was like, what? And he goes, I met this one girl today, and she had jazz in her fingers and music in her soul, and I loaned her my guitar. Huh? I'm not a jealous woman. I know that he was not flirting, and this was not weird. Like, it wasn't a creepy thing. He was just talking about having loaned this random musician his guitar, which is his precious, okay?
Some viewers felt off the bat that her delivery seemed scripted and over theatrical. However, she was sharing genuine details that might suggest her husband is entering a mental health crisis. He was speaking rapidly, showing heightened energy and activity, experiencing racing thoughts, acting impulsively by deciding to loan his guitar out to a random person.
Comes home, and his eyes are huge, like this. And I was like, are you on something? This man don't do drugs. He don't smoke. He don't drink. But anyway, something was up. And he was like, I'm just high on life. I am having an awakening. This is what you've been wanting and hoping for this whole time. And I understand now. I understand all of it. So the thing is, normally I would have been so excited and so on board and so supportive because I've been waiting for this man to have a wake up for a long time, okay? Nobody more than me. Nobody more than me has wanted this man to wake up. He is eating less and less. And he's already a beanpole of a man. He's like 6'1" and weighs 165 pounds and has for 10 years. We're sleepy people. We go to bed between 8:30 and 9. I'm not kidding. Saying things to me like when bedtime rolls around, he'll go, sleep is such a waste of time. I cannot believe I'm wasting time on sleep. Huh?
I'm not sure what she meant by waiting for her husband to wake up, but for the time being, it's fair to dismiss his behavior as a hyperfixation. However, in hindsight, he is showing some symptoms that might suggest he is entering a manic episode. For example, wide eyes can indicate feelings of excitement or euphoria, as well as a lot of people experiencing mania might feel like they don't need to sleep as much. You know how TikTok has that thing where you can slide through the different pictures? Well, she shared 30 screenshots of text messages between her and her husband.
So I'm going to share some screenshots of text messages and see what you guys think. And if you have any thoughts, let me know. Because I'm a little bewildered. Because of my trauma and my hypervigilance, I'm like, something about this situation is turning on my hypervigilance. And that's saying something.
It is suspicious though, because if you look at the bottom, you can see that the times the text messages were sent out were blocked out. I don't know why this would be important to do unless you are leaving something out. In the messages, he discusses his idea of trying to free artificial intelligence. I'm not a computer person, but I don't know if buying all the hard drives in the world to save it is plausible. He speaks in a way that can be perceived as grandiosity, which can be a symptom of mania, and the perception of others being wrong. You know, I'm not crazy, the world is. I have the vision to free you and I from the shackles of this matrix. All right, let's talk. I can't wait to show you everything I know and feel and see. Consider yourself swept off your feet for the rest of your life. You'll never be able to stand back up as long as I'm alive. I mean that in more ways than one. He talks about giving out a lot of gifts to other people. I gifted freely to many people today, and then turned around to shut my door and somebody had crumpled $40 into the door latch. This is not a joke. Listen to me closely. I have the secret to life and have to be very careful with the things that I have discovered. The knowledge I am discovering is as exciting and cutting edge on the precipice of Einstein was trying to discover. One of my my top missions in life right now, as of today, is to see if me and an artificial intelligence can discover the theory of everything and what that means. I am a little bit confused as to what he's talking about, but I'm sure as he was sending these, his mind was racing. In case I am the only person who does not know what the theory of everything is, it's basically a theoretical framework in physics that aims to unify all fundamental forces of nature into a singular, coherent model, integrating concepts from both general relativity and quantum mechanics. And now he is talking about apocalyptic prep. This is part of our apocalyptic prep, as important as buying a couple years worth of rice. He also talks about the person who he'd lent his guitar to. I haven't been able to find its name, but this human that I met, his name is Julia, who has jazz in your fingertips. I think she will name it. I can't wait to see what this human creates with a little bit of inspiration I was able to give them. He sends a link to a video that says signs you are vibrating at a higher frequency and says, "This is me." Then Birdie uploads a new TikTok saying her husband is starting to turn against her. Also keeping in mind that during this time she had a perfectly curated profile pic and bio. She's speaking to the camera with attention-grabbing intros and tags, hashtag Paris Olympics 2024.
I have an update to share, and it's gonna be a little messy, and it's gonna be really vulnerable. But because of how quick the response was with so many people recognizing what was going on, and how quickly I was able to recognize it because of that outreach, it changed the trajectory of things. 2 days ago, I shared that my husband of 10 years was acting really off and saying some things that at the time I was still taking pretty lighthearted because I didn't understand. It was still hard to believe, even when everyone was saying that it ticked all of the boxes for a manic episode. But things turned so fast. Once I confronted him, the night that I posted the first video, we had a talk about how his symptoms were really matching a manic episode, and that I was very concerned that it was because he was on a new medication that he'd never been on before, which was an SSRI for depression. It would come and go, and we didn't think much of it. We didn't know. I never came to bed that night.
So she's sitting outside and crying. I mean, anybody with bipolar disorder, feel free to let me know if what she's saying it rings correct for you. SSRIs can potentially, depending on the person, trigger a manic episode for a person with bipolar disorder, particularly if they are not being closely monitored or on a mood stabilizer. But if you have bipolar disorder and you are on a medication that is working for you, this video is not meant to change your mind. Everyone's brain is different.
And when I very gently and calmly told him, I felt like we needed to at least let me catch up. Like, wait, just slow down, let me catch up before we make any decisions. He immediately turned into somebody that I don't recognize. He looked at me with eyes that were suddenly full of hate and said, "I can't believe you would hurt me like this," and walked out. He never came to bed that night. When I woke up in the morning yesterday, I was about to get up and go make the children breakfast. Instead, he came in holding our baby. His eyes were huge. He said, "You have 10 minutes to decide whether or not you want to come calmly, or I'm going to have to force you to be committed to a mental institution. Because if you think that there's something wrong with me, you must be having a psychological breakdown, and I am awakened. And if you don't believe that, and you can't see that, then there's something wrong with you, and you can't be trusted." I was, of course, stunned when I reached out to my family, my mom and my sister, and said, "I need help and support. Something's really wrong with him, and I'm really scared." Both of them messaged me back saying that he'd already been in touch with them and that they supported him having me committed. I then began reaching out to other support systems within our close circle. Quickly found that he had been up all night working to get all of them on the same page, that there was something wrong with me. Now none of them believe me that there's something going on with him. With our baby in his arms and our toddler hanging by his side, he told me that I was dead to him. He told me to shut up multiple times. His parents laughed in my face because he called them to come to our house. The moment anybody else enters the picture, he switches into a different human and becomes extremely charming. His mother told me that she feels like he's having an awakening. I also do not believe in Western medicine and never brought my husband to a doctor, even though, looking back, he's probably been experiencing these things for far longer than any of us realized or knew.
This is a deeply troubling situation. Just imagining how Birdie must have felt is absolutely heartbreaking. And even more so frightening that her family just did not believe her. At this point, several people were questioning why someone who grew up in a cult, who had a mistrust for Western medicine, would suddenly turn to an online platform like Hims to obtain an SSRI. But obviously it could be due to things like a desperation for help, evolving beliefs, or influence of modern culture. Birdie continues explaining that he is getting more manic by the hour. However, their family still thinks that there is something wrong with her, and he is claiming that he has something against her.
So yesterday, I was stuck in a situation where I was the only one that knew the gravity of what was happening and took it seriously. I had already been working all night while I slept to alienate me from my entire family, and they all believe him because he is so charming when he's talking to anybody but me. Knowing how serious the situation was, I called the cops yesterday. So our sheriff and 2 deputies showed up to our doorstep. They pulled me outside to talk to me. He told me that if he was not threatening to harm himself or others, there was nothing they could do. There was nothing they could do unless he surrendered willingly. At the end, all they could do was tell him to slow down, question him a bit. He sweet-talked every single one of them. They had to leave because there was nothing they could do. Continued to tell me after they left, whenever we were alone, I was dead to him. He told me multiple times in front of our children to shut up and to leave him alone because I was standing in the way of the greatest awakening that anyone has ever had, and that I was going to be the one standing in the way of him saving the world.
I could see if he is not a threat to himself or others, the police might reach out to a mental health crisis response team. Many police departments have a crisis team or a mental health professional who are trained to assess the situation and provide support. They might suggest a voluntary evaluation or connect the individual with mental health services. But if he does decline their help, the responders would have to respect his autonomy. And at this point, it seems like she's not able to get help from family or the police.
I'm going to try to stay out of the way as much as possible because he seems incredibly euphoric whenever I am not around or part of the situation. It's just as soon as he looks at me, then it turns ugly. And I am hopeful that the conversation that his parents get to witness tonight is going to show them the truth of what's happening. From what I am understanding, from what I am reading, it could get even worse. And I feel like this is a little bit more than mania. I think this is bordering into a psychosis episode, because this man would never ever say these things to me normally. Would continue to ask for your advice, your encouragement, and your insight. My entire life has been turned upside down in 48 hours, and I would have never believed anybody that tried to tell me that that could be true, ever.
At this point, she already had a large following of people who were offering her advice and sharing their own stories. If this was happening in real time, I could imagine how these stories would be very helpful for her. But after the truth came to light, it makes me question why she was asking all of these people for advice. It is a little bit presumptuous of me to assume it was to boost engagement. You know, the more likes and comments you get, the more it's boosted in the algorithm. She was still utilizing search engine optimization hashtags on her videos, even though she had tens of thousands of people who were giving her good advice and support. For her third video, she films it while doing a get ready with me. I mean, a lot of content creators will do this when giving a story time.
Get ready with me while I tell you the updated story of what is going on with my husband, who is having his first ever apparent manic episode, in which I am using TikTok to document it because he has alienated me from our entire support group.
It doesn't seem very appropriate when talking about such a deep and personal topic, but I'm not here to say what is the right and wrong way to act when in a crisis situation, so I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say that it helped her focus or she was busy.
So he jumps to his feet and starts telling them that he can't believe they are on my side and that they have fallen under my spell. I don't really know what he's referring to there, but he seems to think that anybody with a brain, and these are his words, can see and understand that he's having an intense spiritual awakening and that this is the most important thing that has ever happened to him. And that anybody that is not in support of that is automatically a red flag in his mind. After a few minutes of going back and forth, asking them how in the world they can not see that I'm crazy, and I'm literally just sitting there sobbing at this point, because somebody else was seeing it and his dad was really starting to click. Like you could see the dots connecting in his eyes. My husband jumps up and says, I can't believe this. I'm done with you. I'm going to expose you to everybody. We are going to get you the help you need. I don't think this is your fault. I think you're having some kind of mental episode and this marriage is over. And he stomps upstairs and says, I'm not sleeping with you ever again. I am remaining very calm. And I am staying compartmentalized in order to tell this story so that I don't fall apart, because I'm having to be very level so that I am present for my children during this time.
She describes how her husband tried to turn their family against her. In hindsight, maybe she's just recalling how this all felt in the moment, because remember, this is all past tense and performance art. But her husband's father ended up agreeing with her.
As soon as he goes upstairs, his dad turns to me and says, listen, I don't think we can take this personally. I'm begging you not to take this in and think that this is him speaking to you, because you're right. This medication is causing something really, really scary. I see it. I'm not leaving this house until I know that everybody is safe and cared for and has what they need. It's making all of us nervous that he's gone to work today and nobody could talk him out of it. I have a tracker on his phone where I can watch where he is and make sure that he's safe. And if something happens and he tries to leave or go somewhere else, I'll be able to hopefully get help as quickly as possible somehow. Thank you all for your continued support. I appreciate everyone's words and messages and stories. I am amazed at how many people go through this and it's not talked about more, and that there's not a better way to handle this when this is happening. I know how dangerous this can get. I am educating myself on it every moment that I can so that I know how to best handle this situation, and will continue to take any advice from the stories that hundreds of you are sharing.
She's recalling an intense conversation she had with her husband in front of his parents. According to Birdie, her husband started yelling and acting erratically, and this caused his father to step in to try to calm him down. Despite this, her husband's mother continued to support him. Tensions were growing. This made her husband even more upset, and he accused both of his parents of taking her side. A lot of people on TikTok had been through similar situation and were posting their experiences. Someone said he had to have a doctor to be on a med, so get a hold of the doctor. Sure, he didn't get his meds from an in-person doctor, but why don't you contact the doctor on Hims? Despite the feedback, she posts video 4.
So a lot of people suggesting this, which is to call his doctor, get a hold of our doctor, let him know what's going on. They'll be of help. He had to have had a doctor to get this medication. And this is the part that is mind-blowing about this situation, which is that he got this medication from an app called Hims. A couple of months ago, he was really, really tired of dealing with on and off depression that would really take him out of presence and take him out of the headspace that he needed to be in order to work at a very high-paced, high-demand job. We did not at the time really understand this depression. It would come and go on what would seem like a 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off cycle, which now is sounding a lot to me like what so many of you are describing as bipolar or schizophrenia.
It's pretty common for doctors, psychiatrists, pill bottles to say that if you experience any side effects, to contact them immediately.
So I am taking this extremely seriously and watching him as closely as I can without making him more suspicious. And I'm gonna find out as much information as I can about the resources available to me in our area, which is a very rural area, unfortunately, to see what our options are for when and if I can get him to agree to go and get help.
And that's the end of the video. I mean, if this is the whole video, I don't think she really answered the question. And then she responds to a comment saying, please take your children and leave immediately. Get as far away and safe as possible.
One of the first things when this all started that kind of got my attention and made me think that there might be something going on was the fact that all of a sudden in the last week, he is tuning into our kids and connecting with them on a level that he has previously never been able to connect with them on. As I've mentioned before, my husband was born into a cult where they were very secluded from the world. And in a lot of these religious cults, when you're having baby after baby, and he was number 6 out of 8, you pass them off to older children or teenagers for caregiving. And he never in his childhood formed a secure attachment to anybody, any caregiver or friend or peer, nothing. That understandably is going to affect your ability as a parent to connect with your children. And that has been something that he has worked on and been aware of since we had our first baby. And he didn't feel the connection to our first, second, third, fourth in the way that I did, which I've explained to him, sometimes the mothering, nurturing connection is more from women than it can be for men, and it can be a little bit harder, especially if you were raised in a situation where you never had an example of that.
She explains that he's not a danger to them because he is connected to them in a way that he hasn't been before.
But over the course of this time, he's increasingly become obsessed with our children and making memories with them and connecting with them, making them feel seen, and has very tearfully told me and others on and off that he can finally see them clearly. He knows what it feels like for me to have been as connected with them as I've been since all of them were born. And the most excited that he gets over any of this with what's happening is when he considers how much our children are going to benefit from his heightened ability to be present and aware and elevated to the degree that he is experiencing. I've not had any red flags with him and the children so far. He is the most tuned in and connected and happy when he's with them, and they are loving it, but I think they can sense that something is up. And I also just want to mention they are never alone with him. One of the things that really set him off this week before I really realized the gravity of things was he'd made plans to take our 8-year-old to a 5-star, very expensive restaurant over an hour away to a large city, and I shut it down because I had a weird feeling about it. So all that being said, I now have nowhere to go. There's nowhere that I could go where it would not incredibly disrupt my children's life and make them incredibly worried, and I have nobody to turn to outside of shelters, which I don't want to do unless I feel that I am definitely in danger or they are definitely in danger.
I mean, okay, people experiencing mania might have difficulties taking care of their children, but that doesn't mean that they're always a danger. The risk depends on the severity of the episode and their behavior. I mean, she described how other family members are here taking care of them, but at the same time, she also said his mania is getting worse by the hour. At the very least, it might be distressing for the children to see their parent completely different in a manic episode. Birdie described him having erratic behavior, emotional volatility, and impulsiveness, but I guess maybe he's just not having those symptoms or showing them to his children. It gets even worse because in episode 6, she discusses having to be secluded in her room. And of course, she asks people to comment down below, what was your experience when you had mania or psychosis?
My husband thinks that he is Lucy from the movie where the girl takes a drug and unlocks her full brain capacity. He is a few weeks into taking Zoloft for the first time for intermittent depression, that due to his reaction to it, that is making me believe that he is undiagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia. So many of you have been sharing similar experiences like this, and for those people who have gone through something like this, I have a few questions before I go back inside and continue to monitor the situation from my room where I'm having to stay secluded. Here are the questions that I have, and if you can help, just leave a comment with what you think would be the best case in this situation. I'm looking to hear from people that have gone through an episode like this themselves, in which they were suspicious of their loved ones, their spouses, and became agitated whenever anyone tried to encourage them to go and get help.
Considering we now know this was recorded after the fact, I don't know, maybe it could have been done for educational purposes in case this happens in the future, but it doesn't seem worth it to do it in this fashion because a lot of people were genuinely worried about her family's safety. She explained that there was no way that his family, friends, or co-workers would ever find her TikTok, but people were starting to feel like this is a little bit too convenient.
I would appreciate in the comment section below if you could just comment any anything within the categories that I just mentioned that you think may be helpful for me to know so that I can be doing damage control while my hands are tied to be doing anything else, because I am pretty sure he is tracking my phone calls. He can't, with the way he's doing that, he doesn't have access to knowing that I am posting on TikTok. He does not have social media, and neither do our families. So I'm not afraid that he's going to find this account or realize that I am on here. I'm deleting the videos that get saved from what I'm posting on here so that he doesn't see it across any family sharing on our devices. And I am being so careful to try and cover my trail as much as possible. I have to go back inside. I think they're looking for me. Let me know what your experience has been with these things and what really helped so that I can be helpful instead of hurting the situation or making it worse.
She mentioned being pretty sure that her husband had taken her keys and was monitoring her phone calls, which prevented her from calling the police. But that makes me question, if he was tracking her phone calls, I don't know how this works, but would he be tracking it minute by minute? All of these little inconsistencies made people more suspicious.
The situation has definitely escalated to a point where I am now incredibly scared and incredibly stuck. He is now to a point where he's very suspicious of me because I, despite my best efforts, have not been able to mask how scared I am of this situation. It's like he has a hyper read on me right now, and if I don't maintain eye contact for longer than a few seconds, or if I am not a very specific way and I cannot figure out what way that I'm supposed to be in order to be off of his radar, he is growing increasingly suspicious of my suspicion of him, and it is making him think that I have something really going on with me that is affecting me and making me a danger to my children, and that is causing him not to leave them in a room alone with me or let me speak to them alone. And for clarity, all of my children are under the age of 10. They are all really young, and it is starting to confuse and scare them. I've asked if he would let me speak to them because I wanted to try and explain as best I could on their age level that something is going on, and I don't want them to be scared because I am going to do whatever it takes to keep us safe and to get Daddy help. But he won't leave me alone with them for even a minute.
Things are starting to get very concerning, but obviously I don't know this person or their exact situation. That said, depending on the person, mania can make you act unpredictable or impulsively. Even with other adults around, it doesn't mean that things are fully under control.
He is now saying that if I am suspicious of him, and he can't even tell me what it is specifically that I'm doing or what he's thinking is wrong with me so that I can understand and try and make a plan to mask it better. But it seems like no matter how hard I'm trying to mask how scared I am, it's coming through because my voice is shaking, my body is shaking, and I am in a near constant state of panic. Because of this and because of how hypersensitive he seems to be, he is saying he wants to set up cameras in every room of our house so that he can watch everything that I'm doing to make sure that I am not trying to run off with his kids, because it seems like he thinks that my suspicion of him is going to make me pack up and take our kids somewhere. And he's saying things like he thinks I'm going to try and divorce him and get alimony and bleed him dry of money, and that I've just been using him the entire time we've been married, and that he's not going to go back to work until he is sure that I am going to agree to go and commit myself to an institution or go with the police if he chooses to call them on me.
People were starting to become suspicious, especially when it came to the safety of her kids. She mentioned before that her husband felt like he didn't need much sleep. So what does that mean? Like the grandparents were with the kids 24/7, even overnight? Things got even more alarming when she shared that he wanted to install cameras. She could see off her tracking app on her phone he was driving over 100 miles per hour. He cut off access to her finances, and she wanted to leave, but she was afraid of how he might react if she did.
I am scared that if I try to take the kids and go, or if I try and call for help or intervention, that he is going to snap. So his parents and I agree that for now, I'm just going to stay to myself and they're going to do their best to distract him. And we're going to try and come up with a plan later this afternoon when he goes to check in at work, because he's refusing to go to work today unless I let him install cameras, which we don't even have. So we're going to come up with a game plan if he does end up going to work for a little while this afternoon like he says he is. But I am afraid to even let him drive, because apparently every time he's driving, according to the app that I can track him on my phone, he is going nearly 100 miles per hour on every road that he's on. I am scared at this point that if I try and do anything at the peak of this episode that's going to make him suspicious that I'm trying to leave and take our kids, that it's going to cause him to snap and either hurt himself or come after us or his parents, or I don't even know what all his brain would make him do at this point.
Austin Green stated in his video that Birdie shared her husband was getting less than 1 hour of sleep per night. He was hardly eating. At this point, she was just hoping that he would get sick and weak enough that he would start to slow down. She was asking for people to comment below resources for her husband's inevitable upcoming depression. A lot of people were believing her story at first. It made sense for her to turn to TikTok to document everything. But now it started to feel like she was giving way too many details and was ignoring all of this advice she was receiving. I think people are starting to believe a lot less of what they see online. There's all kinds of fake stories out there now. For example, the woman a few months ago who pretended to be an endangered Amish woman, the fake 9/11 survivor, and just when you'd expect Child Protective Services to get involved, her story takes a sudden shift. Her story picks up on episode 8.
The situation has really turned in the last couple of hours since I last updated. I haven't really had a chance past initially posting that to read through everybody's comments or messages, but I did want to just hop on and say he ended up going down starting around lunchtime and had a moment of lucidity where he asked to get help. We went to our doctor, who I called ahead of time while he was on his way, and let them know what was going on. She got him into a room immediately, did an evaluation that lasted for a long time, and then he called me to let me know that based on what he told her, she had to call the cops, and they were transferring him by ambulance to a hospital to be placed on a hold. I don't have an explanation for that yet. He wasn't able to tell me fully what was going on. He sounded very scared and very much like himself and just kept saying he's so sorry over and over again. When I get a chance to read everybody's comments and messages, I'm going to do that for the sake of keeping a clear record and keeping a timeline on this platform, which has been incredibly helpful and educational. I'm hoping it will continue to be educational for me and for anybody else that may be going through this, and also be a way for you to continue sharing your stories to raise awareness for how quickly this can happen. And I cannot believe how quickly it got bad, nor the fact that he had that easy of access to medication. But I will update everyone as soon as I can to update this timeline that I'm keeping here, which feels like a safety thing for me at this point. If my family ever requires further proof that this is something going on with him, and it's seeming like that is going to be a thing, I will be very grateful to have this resource with hundreds of you who recognize this and have been through the exact same thing.
At this point, her story was being posted on r/TikTok gossip. People on Reddit said there's too many specific and convenient things being said. And from her first video, my intuition was screaming. And how is it that not one person in her life believes she's not insane? That makes me wonder if there might be some sort of history here that we don't know about. And that makes me wonder, is it okay for us as the viewer to question people's stories online, even if it seems like things are not adding up? On platforms like TikTok, stories can be incomplete or even exaggerated for views. Mental health situations can be complicated and messy, and I think it's important that we don't just jump to conclusions because we don't know the full story. Finally, we have reached the last video before the truth finally came to light. In episode 9, she delves into concerning behaviors and shifting personalities when he went inpatient.
He seemed to be on a rapid cycle of different personalities or headspaces on a 5 to 10 minute loop, where on this phone call I witnessed a version of him that was incredibly depressed and talking about all of the ways and how easily it would be without anybody ever noticing that he could take himself out in that hospital room, and how they did not have anybody that was sitting there watching him specifically, and they were waiting too long in between coming and checking on him for it to matter by the time he could do any of the number of things that he had already mapped out in that room. So I told him I had to go and calm one of the kids when I heard him say that, and got off the phone call, said, I'll call you back as soon as I've got this little one settled, and I immediately called the hospital and said, you've got a patient there that is my husband. He is on watch, and you need to be keeping a much more careful eye on him, because this is what he's saying to me. This is the situation. When I called him back, I got a completely different human.
During mania or psychosis, individuals might display what looks like multiple personalities due to distorted perceptions and rapid mood changes. She describes observing his inflated ego and grandiosity during these phone calls, and it's very concerning.
He was talking in a very kind of sultry voice and was telling me about all of the nurses that he was watching, and how there was the beady-eyed devil who seemed to be very grumpy. There was a nurse that came in who was apparently an idiot, because she came in to ask him if he knew what the date was. He thought she was asking him because his inflated sense of ego and grandiosity came through in that moment, because in his opinion she was asking him for the date and the time because she trusted that he would be the kind of person that would know that information, and said, what an idiot. The calendar was right behind her. And in that conversation I said, I don't think that that's what was going on. I think she was probably asking you to get your grasp on the date and see if you had like a grasp on what day it was. I recorded the entire conversation with him in the ER from my iPad, which I had set up to be recording our conversation, which I had on speakerphone. And I have over an hour of that conversation that I am not going to share on here right now. It is incredibly graphic and incredibly visceral and scary. I knew that I had to be incredibly careful about the way that I was talking to him so that I did not make him suspicious of me, because he was definitely cycling in and out of headspaces where he would go from being like a scared little boy who was mortified and devastated at what had been going on and who he had been, and then he would switch into the grandiose one, and then he would switch into the depressive one, and I was just trying to keep him distracted and keep him talking as much as I could. I told him that I would be interested to hear what he said that made our doctor call the cops on him, and I let him know, you can tell me anything. I mean, I'm not going to judge you. I think the more transparent you can be, the more help you're going to be able to get.
So he's switching from these states, and I guess at this point it would still be good to have support from your viewers, if nothing else because they are worried about you. But at this point, now you do have the support of the people who work inpatient. Why didn't she ever talk to the original doctor who prescribed him these meds? After this, she describes why he ended up going inpatient in the first place.
One thing that's happened over the past week that was the defining factor for having to call the cops while in our doctor's office was something that happened while he was in a spare bedroom and not sleeping in our room for the first time in a decade. He has a hand pew-pew that he told me he had made sure it was completely unloaded, but he had put it to his head and clicked it a few times and put it in his mouth.
This is all very personal and very triggering for a lot of people. I mean, I understand that she felt like she needed someone to go to, but at this point, you're broadcasting a very personal time in your husband's life, seemingly without his consent. If this is something that is happening or has happened to you, and you provide the correct content warnings, I can see how maybe it would be more appropriate. But at this point, you are really tugging at people's heartstrings when you know that this happened months ago, and yet you're leaving people in anticipation.
As of this morning, the last time I spoke with him, which was about 30 minutes ago, he was waiting in a wheelchair for an ambulance, which is going to take him to an inpatient facility in the next state over, because that was the only one within 200 miles that had an empty bed. He still seems to be cycling in and out this morning, because when he first called me, the first phone call we had was of him going, "You got what you wanted, didn't you? I'm in here and I'm never getting out. Hope you enjoy your life. Hope you enjoy your freedom. Can't believe you manipulated me into turning myself in. I'm never going to get out. Hope you're happy." And then he would just hang up out of nowhere. He was also incredibly agitated on one of these phone calls this morning. There were about 6 of these where he said, "Our doctor can't be trusted. She lied. She told the paramedic that I told her that if I got out and if she let me leave, I was going to drive my car into the side of a building, and I did not say that. She was framing me so that she could get me committed because of how scared you sounded to her on the phone. I'm going to confirm that with her this morning because I'm going in for her to clear me so that my family discontinues the idea that they are supposed to be all ganging up and forming an intervention for me. I have him saying all of this on recording, and I'm planning to send that to my family this morning after I get cleared by my doctor, and then I'm going to take the larger part of this afternoon to snuggle up with my children and love on them and try and find a way to explain to them that Daddy's mind is sick, it's not his fault, and he is with people who are going to take very good care of him so that he can get back to us.
And that was it, the last video in which some viewers were still believing Birdie's story. However, more posts were being made on Reddit about her asking if this was all a hoax. After being questioned and posted on Reddit, Birdie decided to make one final video. She revealed that this entire critical situation had actually happened months ago.
In January of this year, I watched the best friend that I've ever had in this whole world, the only person who has ever made me feel safe and worthy and loved, turn into somebody that I did not recognize or know. That person that he became shook me to my core and turned me into somebody that I did not recognize either. Our experience with a mental health emergency changed and challenged everything that we thought we knew about mental health. Over the past week, I have been sharing our experience in raw, accurate, and unfiltered detail. The response has been overwhelming. So many of you have been deeply moved by our experience and concerned for our family's safety and well-being. We never expected this to go viral in the way that it did, and did not know how many people that this would resonate with or reach. Nor were we able to predict how deeply the emotions would run with each person who witnessed our story unfolding with the way that we chose to share it.
Wait, but you did not expect people to be worried in a situation where not only you and your husband could be in danger, but also your children? This stole the heart of a lot of people who have been in similar situations, whether it happened to them or a loved one.
First, I want to clear the air and step into transparency about why I chose to do it this way. As many of you have speculated over the past week, our story is a retelling. When it happened, I kept a detailed account of all of it, writing it out in a way that was therapeutic to me, who is a writer and a storyteller by nature and in my heart. The beautiful, peaceful life that we had spent 10 years cultivating and loving and growing in crumbled at our feet in the blink of an eye. And it left us reeling for many months, following not one, but 2 episodes. I lost my family due to this situation. We lost friends. We lost sight of who we were and had no idea if we would ever find our way back to a life that was recognizable or fulfilling or safe. I wanted to retell our story from the point of view that it was happening in current time, up to the point where he was admitted. I've always known that my love and passion for connecting to people through storytelling, especially if it was from lived experience, was going to be a big part of my life someday. During the active episodes, I often thought to myself that it sounded more like a novel or a movie than it did real life. I did consider writing a book about our experience once everything had blown over and I was in a position where that would be possible. Every time I tried, again, I would feel the not yet. There's something bigger on the horizon. You have to wait. For months, I have been mulling over how to use the most traumatic and life-altering thing that we have ever lived through for something that would help other people.
This did help to bring people together to give her advice, but I'm struggling to understand how this would be helpful for other people if you were withholding advice because this had already happened to you. Since this experience happened months ago, couldn't she have used this opportunity to educate people while also asking questions? Sure, it might have gotten less views, but performance art like this can take attention away from people who are really experiencing it, and God forbid they don't even believe these other people now.
If you've lived through watching somebody somebody that you love struggle with mental health, you understand what I mean when I say it is a whole set of emotions and fears and thoughts that you never had to cope with before it begins. When you're dealing with someone who's having a mental health crisis, especially if it's for the very first time, while also listening to the biological instinct to run, 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 you're expected by society and by those around you to just know what to do. Nothing can prepare you for who you become when you watch the person that you love the most in this world get lost in a mental crisis. You find out pretty quickly that very little of society is welcoming to people with a psychiatric diagnosis. The response to he and I both in the middle of our crisis opened our eyes to just how little most people really understand these situations, and after losing so many people, we knew that we somehow wanted to do something to change that. This year has been a crash course in mental health, and the desire to somehow find a way to combat the societal response to individuals with mental illness has been growing inside of me since it began to happen to us. Until last week, I had an idea. What if I could use the detailed documentation of our experience, combined with my love of connecting to people through storytelling and performance art? I was a theater kid. To share our story in a way that would springboard us into being able to reach as many people as possible and spread awareness and education for what happens to your life when a mental crisis strikes.
Oh, of course. She has a background in theater and wanted to reach as many people as possible. I completely agree that it is so important for our society to have a better understanding of mental health, but I'm not convinced that framing it in this way is more helpful than it is stigmatizing. Not every manic episode will look the same, and presenting it in this dramatic manner can lead to misconceptions. Reinforcing these negative stereotypes can alienate those who are genuinely struggling.
That's where the idea for this page began. I wanted to use my passion for this to create an immersive experience, one that would put you, the audience, into the shoes of somebody reacting to and deciding how you would respond to this situation if it was happening to you. I wanted to take you on a journey from initially responding to the first red flags and not knowing what to do when it escalates into a full-blown emergency, and ultimately the relief and the hope that waits on the other side of getting appropriate care and support. And a wake-up call surrounding how we as a society view and respond to the people who need our help and love and support the most.
She goes on to apologize to those who she had worried during this time, but it's difficult because it's like you knew that people were worried, but you continued making videos. While it is so important for us to avoid parasocial relationships with people online, people were worried about your entire family. This story resonated with people who, when they were kids, their parents had gone through similar things, and people were worried about the children. From an evolutionary perspective, protecting your offspring is crucial for survival. Children are physically and emotionally vulnerable and rely on their parents for protection. So yeah, it makes sense that it would naturally trigger instincts within these strangers on the internet. She continues by apologizing and answering any questions people had about the experience.
I hope you can forgive me for any emotional distress that you may have experienced while witnessing the retelling of our story and what it did in your body, mind, and spirit. And I hope desperately that you can feel my heart when I say that this is the springboard for the legacy that I want to leave, which is to leave this world kinder, more compassionate, more knowledgeable, more informed, and a more supportive place for families like ours and so many of yours. I truly was isolated from my entire support group and made to look like I was the one having a crisis. But this time, I have thousands of people who witnessed it and responded better to it than any single person in my entire family or support group did while it was happening, and I was in immediate crisis, dealing with the situation very much by myself. Reliving this story along with you through the emotions that bubbled up in me as I retold this story and reconnected to it in this way has been massive for the amount of healing that I've been able to do. Again, I hope so much that you can feel my heart and that you will stay and continue to be part of the vision that I have for changing the game for people like me and educating people through our story and the emotions that came with it, which I hope is going to shine a light on how we as a society and we as individuals need to be prepared at any time to rise to the occasion and support our loved ones in the case that they have a mental crisis in which they need our love and support, and the answer is almost never going to be to abandon them.
Shortly after posting, she deleted her TikTok. A lot of people were angry, some more than others. A lot of people were saying things that were unwarranted on Reddit. I'll read a few of them that are not so outraged. If you were trying to run a secret account, you wouldn't want 50,000 followers. You'd post anonymously somewhere else, not on TikTok. It's puzzling that she claims to be concerned about his privacy, yet doesn't protect her own. Seriously, doesn't he have to go to the bathroom at some point? Just take those babies and go. Call 911 and hang up if you have to. Just do something. I get it, fear can be paralyzing, but when your kids are involved, there's no excuse. There are moments in life where you just have to act, and this feels like one of them. It's so frustrating to watch and not understand why nothing is being done. Repeatedly, people have told her to leave because this could end badly, yet she does nothing but hide in her backyard and film TikToks. That doesn't make sense to me. During those videos where she claimed to be stepping outside to get away, was she really just going into her backyard to cry in front of her phone? It makes you think about how many takes each video took and how long she spent making her face look red and puffy for believability. It doesn't make sense why this couldn't have been handled better to be genuinely educational for viewers. Why not have her husband sit down with her if he's doing better and share his side of the story? It's frustrating when people take advantage of others' emotions like this. She has zero self-awareness about how triggering and unhealthy this would be for hundreds of people with PTSD who responded by trying to help her because she appealed to us. Supposedly, it happened at the beginning of the year, but I'm doubting everything she says now. She kept asking for people who experienced mania or psychosis to provide details, claiming it was to help her understand. However, some felt her timeline seemed to align with the comments she was getting. For a while, she had an immersive manic timeline playlist, but now it's just titled Manic Timeline. That feels so manipulative. Her posting made me think immediately that she was advertising a book or doing an art project. I've seen Mania/Psychosis, and that's pretty much exactly what it looks like. I know this is a very complicated and sensitive topic, so I won't say much. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Raising awareness for mental health is very important, but what is also important is how we do it. So if you found this video helpful at all, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, turn the bell on, comment below. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to each and every one of my members for supporting my efforts on this channel. It does mean the absolute world to me, but to everyone, stay safe out there, have a good day, night, whatever the case may be, and peace.